Welcome to episode 8 of the Millennovator podcast, where you are about to hear the story of Icebox Coffee, who literally founded on paint buckets and pantyhose and was 4 years later acquired by one of the South's largest coffee distributors, Royal Cup. Let's get it.
For those sitting on their sofa hating their job, we are probably a good story to follow. Or if you're not sitting on your sofa, if you're sitting at your cubicle, interneting things that you could do instead of working the job you work, we are that kind of story.
You're listening to the Millennovator podcast, where we host the most innovative millennial entrepreneurs, and you learn the secret tips, proven tricks, and profitable tools they have picked up from entrepreneurial infancy to straight up business empire, and every stage in between. And now, your hosts and money Millennovators, Jonathan and Will.
Give me the mic, not down, go right down. I'm trying to sit it, not down, go right down. You trying to get it, not down, go right down.
A lot of people, Jonathan, like coffee, but that's not us.
We do not like coffee.
We are infatuated with coffee.
We love coffee.
We love business and we love coffee and we love you listening to the show right now. That's why we have the famed guest, BB Goodrich, founder of Icebox Coffee, on the show today.
We're so excited to have BB. We're excited about everyone we have on the show, but as coffee lovers, we are so excited to have her on the show and just hear her story and how she started.
Well, and it's really interesting, and I'll let BB speak on it as I always do, but she found a type of cold brew coffee. Well, she grew up on a type of cold brew coffee.
Yeah.
That is not anywhere else in the country other than New Orleans, baby.
New Orleans.
And BB is from New Orleans. She was raised down there. She gets it. She knows business too, let me tell you. She's going to share a little bit about the product, number one, but also she talks a lot about pivoting your business model, right? I really love that part of this interview. And you know how I am. Jenny Blake wrote a book, and I'll tag that in the show notes, called Pivot. And that book is incredibly resourceful, and BB basically reads right off of it without even knowing about that book. Hold up. Do you have a website yet? Are you spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars to maintain that website? Or are you concerned about creating a website and dropping hundreds and hundreds of hours into creating it? Listen, I have created websites in nearly every single way possible. Unfortunately, the truth is all of them failed, except for one. As a result, I have created an ebook that will show you how to get a fully functioning site without spending thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours. Inside the ebook, you will learn how to build and launch your website in less than 24 hours for under $1 a day. Now you can download the ebook for free at millennovator.com/side hustle site launch. And for those detail police out there listening, you can find the details there too. All right, so I promised you we'd get back into today's episode, and let's do it. Let's dive into today's topic and interview together now.
It's amazing how she takes an obstacle. It could be a hurdle or an obstacle or a negative something happening in her business, and she just turns it into a pivot point to move further and get further in the direction that her business needs to go. So we're super excited about you guys hearing her today.
Another cool thing about this interview. Gotta share this. She talks about how the side hustle thing, how great is that? Like, look, you guys out there, I know that you were listening to the show right now. You were listening to the show. I know who you are. You have a day job, and you're working so hard on the side of this idea. You've got this idea. You're grounding it. You're pounding it. You know that it's there, and the future could be there, but this day job is standing in your way. However, a lot of times that day job is providing you with the skills it takes to succeed in that side hustle. Right?
So that's the question. Are you in a job that is helping you get to make your side hustle a full-time hustle?
And if you are not, would you be willing to quit your current job, not to take on your side hustle quite yet, but to move into a role with a company that encourages and fosters your growth to reflect that in your side hustle?
That is the question of the day.
Let's see what BB did when it came to that, because she did come to that crossroads.
She did.
And she took one route.
She took two routes, actually. Which is
Let's dive into both of those two routes in this interview now with BB Goodrich of Icebox Coffee. All right, guys, we are sitting here with BB of Icebox Coffee, one of my favorite cold brew coffees, really and truly across the state, across the nation. But more importantly, she's here locally in Birmingham. BB, how are you doing?
I am great. How are you guys?
Doing great.
As Jonathan mentioned earlier, he's a little bit numb.
Yeah, I got 2 fillings probably like 2 hours ago, so I'm kind of coming down from my numbness, but half of my mouth is still numb, so if I slur my words a little bit, I can blame it on that.
There you go.
Well, thanks for joining us here today. We're super pumped about having you, number one, because your coffee is the bomb, but number two, you have a really unique story and you fit in so well with our audience. So do you mind sharing with us about your company and where you guys founded and why you founded and just everything from the beginning?
Absolutely. And I think for those sitting on their sofa hating their job, we are probably a good story to follow. So, or if you're not sitting on your sofa, if you're sitting at your cubicle, interneting things that you could do instead of working the job you work, we are that kind of story. So I grew up in New Orleans, went from New Orleans to D.C. or to college in between, then to D.C., worked on the Hill, came to Birmingham in 2010 and started working for a nonprofit that I thought was going to be the career path I wanted forever and ever. Got relatively disenfranchised quickly there in less than 1 year, right? So I came to town thinking, this is it. Getting married to this handsome man. I have this perfect job. We're going to live in this cute house and the world is going to be just excellent. And then not-for-profit turned out to be not quite
what you thought it was going to be.
What I was looking for. Yes. So while sitting in my desk in my not-for-profit job, I constantly was thinking, what can I do? I got to do something. And it turns out that the thing to do was bring the coffee that I had grown up on, cold brew coffee, to market. And the reason being is I kept making it at home or buying it when I was back in New Orleans and driving it up here and recognizing that there genuinely was not access to this type of product outside of New Orleans. Whether it's in a coffee shop setting or in the grocery store, nobody was doing it. The timing, I didn't realize, was impeccable. In 2012, I quit my job. Christmas was my last week there, I guess, leading up to Christmas. Turned a little corner of our house into a home office and started writing a business plan. And I got this template from Devin Laney at Innovation Depot. It was basically 12 steps on how to start a business. Step number 1, name your business. Step number 2, what is your 12 steps to forming a business. And I started typing that out. And meantime, I went home and told my parents, hey, I quit my job and I'm going to start a coffee business, quite like the cold brew we grew up on. So my dad, who was is a hobbyist, was into micro roasting at the time.
Oh, very.
And so he and I sat down. Yes, I know. He's a quirky dude. You need one of those in your life if you're going to succeed. So find someone quirky would be step 1. But he roasted coffee for me. I brought it back with that coffee, went to Home Depot, got a paint bucket, and Walmart, and got some Pantyhose and started formulating. So it was all in the time span. Yeah, it was like the time span of 3 weeks. I was like, okay, I'm quitting my job, husband quitting job, check. Dad starting a business, and then this business plan, had to write it, but formulate at the same time. So it was, as you get to know me, one of my strengths is also a huge weakness is I'm super impatient. So if you're not moving fast enough for me, I just do it myself, which has allowed us to succeed. But at the same time, it also yields really a lot of bad results. So quit your job, start a business requires some thought process. And so that's what I spent the next 4 months focusing on. We went to Pepper Place Market and tested. And my favorite thing about our original business plan was that I had, there is no we in this phase because a we would have talked me out of it. I had thought that we would sell $1 million in cold brew coffee in the 11 weeks we were going to function at Pepper Place.
Wow.
It took us 4 years to generate $1 million in revenue.
I was going to say, you set your goals lofty.
It was 11 Saturdays. Yeah, but I was like, okay, well, I need to sell, 5 cups a minute, and that's totally doable. And there's 8,000 people that visit Pepper Place on a Saturday, so I need to capture 3% of the Pepper Place market in order, and at the end of the day, it didn't make sense.
So you broke down the statistics.
Yeah, but it gave me something to work towards. But then that's how we got started. So we tested our model then came back to Devin and said, thanks for the template. Now here's our business plan. Please let us in because we need a place to function. And from there, we just started growing. And so at the end of the day, I think your question was, I'm really bad at answering questions, so you have to remind me. I have only sisters. I talk in circles. How did we get our start? It was being just pissed off at the job I was doing and determining that I was going to do something different and just go. Because the worst case scenario, which is still, and this will circle up later, I'm sure, in the interview, the worst case scenario, you fail. So like, what was the worst thing that was going to happen if I quit my job? I would have to go find a new one, period.
I agree with that 1,000%. And I think that everyone listening to the show is thinking the same thing. And that's why, you know, so many people who are listening today, and you may be listening today, and you may be thinking, gosh, I can't quit my job yet, right? Like, I'm just trying something on the side. Maybe they've gone to Walmart and bought the pantyhose, and maybe they've gone to Walmart and bought the paint bucket, and they've gotten the beans and they're trying it on the side while working. So, but you're telling us, Bibi, that your number one reason for leaving was you just knew that wasn't right. It wasn't necessarily that you had the perfect product yet or the client base yet, but you just knew what you were doing wasn't a good fit. Is that right?
Yeah, I had absolutely no true strategy, but and I often say this to people: if you don't try, you're never going to try. So if you don't conclude one day to quit, and don't be confused, I had a side hustle for the first 2 years because ultimately our household still needed money to function.
Sure.
Like, you have to eat. We got a new puppy, and that puppy needed a lot of attention.
Ultimately,
we had kids. Yeah, so like all these things still cost money, and so you have to, and your ideas won't generate money for a while. So, and after January, when I was setting up writing the 4 months writing the business plan, I, did a couple Etsy projects and did some work for my mom, who's a lawyer. Like, I can internet that for you, Mom. Like, just found ways to generate dollar bills.
Nice.
And then got a real job at Adams Produce, where I was going to learn the business of distribution from the ground up. Well, as luck would have it, Adams Produce went belly up. It was a 110-year-old company, and the CEO was swindling money, ripping off the government, wound up in prison. It was a huge scandal. So 6 weeks into this new career trajectory that was going to give me the education I needed to prop up my business, I lost that job. So then I fortunately, and this will come again back full circle at the end, Hatton Smith, who was the CEO of Royal Cup at the time, was a mentor of mine and said, why don't you come work for us on the side while you grow your business? And so that is where we generated the income. Icebox was self-funded, which comes in play a lot to our story and our growth trajectory. And ultimately, we'll talk about good decisions, bad decisions, but nevertheless, a decision made was to self-finance, which meant you had to generate income when the business wasn't. So,
right. And you don't see Jonathan right now, but if you did, you'd see him slowly clapping on the side because we're huge proponents of that, and that is so respectable. So, number one, congratulations. But Jonathan,
yeah, I mean, I don't think people really think about in-depth parts of a business plan like you've talked about so far, but just the fact that you thought out, okay, what is it I need to learn to ultimately get my business off the ground? Yeah, it'd be funny if you could hear, if you listen to our podcast, you hear that the common theme is you just got to jump out there and go do it, because if you don't, it's never going to get done. So you did that, but like you said, there's bills to pay. I have a 2.5-year-old boy. I have a dog. I have a house. I have a wife. I have things I have to pay for. You still have a side hustle, but how can that side hustle benefit what I'm going to do ultimately for my business? How can that part-time job that I'm doing to pay the bills benefit? So I think that's a great point that we need to, briefly just touch on real quick, that you had those jobs to benefit your ultimate business plan and to benefit you on what you needed to learn and grow in to ultimately get where you were going to go.
Yeah, and I cannot speak enough to the side hustle at Royal Cup, because Hatton basically said, come here and we need somebody to innovate. You seem quirky and young and stupid, right? Like, you think you're an innovator. Come work for us and bring some of your stupidity here. And what it did for me is I learned the industry from the ground up. So I was the smallest version, Royal Cup being the largest, and my objective was to meet them in the middle at some point, which we have recently done. During that time, I learned sales, and they have a different model than we utilized, but I learned from them one version of how to succeed, and then I was building my own version of success and being able to check it against something. So I learned sales, I networked, I learned what the industry trends were, and someone else was paying for it. So I would get, this is not relevant to all industries, but Nielsen data, which would show you what flavors are trending and what consumers are looking for and what size container to utilize. Royal Cup was buying these for their own purposes, and I was having access to them. That's $10, $20, $30,000 worth of data that you don't have. As a startup, I wasn't going to afford to pay for that, so I would have always been a day late and a dollar short to most opportunities without having that additional resource, which is what, and a job keeps you grounded, right? Because then you're like, shit, I really got to work hard because I do not want to work in a desk for someone else every day for the rest of my life.
I get that, and that's a very strategic move. You know, a lot of people find you're a very unique story in that Icebox was your full-time gig, and you had side hustles that were contributing towards it. Some people listening to the show may have a full-time gig that the knowledge and experience and understanding that is coming from that full-time gig is contributing to their side hustle, in which hopefully one day that side hustle becomes a full-time gig, right? And the full-time job and what they're doing. And so there's absolutely nothing wrong with forwarding another company, but gaining that information it takes. I mean, I met with a soon-to-be CPA, actually currently a CPA, who is in a very traditional model just not too long ago and is working with business owners, but knows his little side hustle that he has is geared towards that specific business owner that he's niched with in the CPA group. And I'm thinking, what a great opportunity to just test that market, see the trends, see their pain points, see what problems they have that they need to solve, and then form the solution around those. So that's extremely well played on your part, on your behalf, to stay in that industry.
Well, and even if you didn't have the privilege or opportunity, say you're innovating something that didn't exist, you can still learn sales because, by God, everyone's got to sell. I mean, you got a product you have to sell. You have to raise the capital, whether you raise it off yourself, through self-financing, or you raise it from an outsider. You need to understand how to work with people. So no matter what you're doing, I mean, shit, you could work at McDonald's and it would attribute something to your entrepreneurial spirit because you've got to be customer-centric. I mean, few businesses don't have customers. That doesn't exist, I don't think.
So, Bibi, can you tell us briefly about... You mentioned early on I want to dig into your product because I love your product. You mentioned early on about how you were driving back and forth from New Orleans, and there was just specific coffee there that you just couldn't get your hands on in Birmingham. And so you saw the business opportunity, but what made that product different and made you feel like, you know what, this is viable? Like, other people will love this. I just know it.
Yeah. So cold brew is ubiquitous in New Orleans, and it's been a process and a practice that you could find in grocery stores and coffee shops 30, 40 years. It's not new. My grandmother did it. I'm sure, I mean, this makes it, this probably not sure. Her grandmother probably didn't have pantyhose, so she probably couldn't make it. But it's something that it is part of the fabric of New Orleans. Mm-hmm. So then leaving New Orleans and not finding a liked item, but recognizing the obsession and the culinary culture that is New Orleans, where people prioritize food over everything else. So it's got to be good if that's what everyone in New Orleans is doing.
Amen.
And not finding it elsewhere just seemed like a big, obvious, why am I buying this? If I'm pulling this back and forth, then there's got to be other people who want it. I think at the end of the day, what made me say I can do this, again, goes back to what happens if it doesn't work? Who cares if it doesn't work? But that's one place where I think I deviate from a lot of entrepreneurial stories, is that was a guiding factor, and it drove a lot of decision-making up until February of 2017. So from January of 12 to February of 17, every decision, in whether it's to hire, to fire, to grow into a new market, to take a risk, lend more money to the business, quit my other job, whatever it was always managing against worst case scenario, you fail. So I was never going to over leverage my husband and I, and now our family, to where we couldn't walk away from the business if we needed. I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. So we have a 5-year-old business, a 4-year-old boy, and a 3-year-old boy. I hate to say it, but you never know what's coming down tomorrow, right? So for me, it was always being able to walk away. Why I bring that up back to what got you started is, what else are you going to do with your time? Like, I don't know what people do for their hobbies, but I was out of hobbies to tinker in, right? I had run out of little activities to occupy my mind, so might as well go attempt to build a business. With that being said, that worst case scenario, you fail, manage with the expectation you might fail tomorrow can also serve as a hindrance. There are many times that I would go home and I would say, Thomas, I think I'm going to quit tomorrow. And he's like, well, I don't understand why. Why are you going to quit? I said, well, this isn't working out my way. And he said, okay, let's go down the checklist. So our debts are manageable. The future is still bright. And on a day-to-day basis, you still like what you're doing. So why are you quitting? And I'm like, okay. So momentary defeat, right? But you're constantly, so those are the things we checked ourselves against. And then managing the debt changed in February. And I think that's what really was the most dramatic shift in our business. Wasn't our growth rate. We grew at 300 to 400% year over year. The last 6 months, we grew by 3,000%. So that's a big old growth trajectory. Overwhelming experience. But in February, we went from being able to manage our debts to saying, okay, we just took out a loan we cannot actually service. And good news is we no longer have that loan. So if the person's listening, I don't owe them any money, but we took out a loan we could not actually service. So we only had one choice effective February 2017. And it was no longer worst case scenario, you failed. It was like, you don't have a choice. You have to succeed because failure is too costly. Yeah. And that changed. I mean, it took us almost 5 years to get there. And understanding. And so I went about entrepreneurism very differently than a lot of people. One of the questions you ask, and y'all just say, BB, shush, because I'm used to speaking over people. And so I just talk louder.
Hey, BB, guess what? Our show is interview-based and story-based for a reason. We love hearing your stories, so keep going.
Yeah, so one thing that people keep asking me, they're like, you're going to do this again, right? And you're an entrepreneur. I think describing yourself as an entrepreneur works for some people that are serial entrepreneurs. I am a woman who had an opportunity and then went and relentlessly pursued it and was open to advice, and the stars aligned. I mean, for me to get from my house in January of 2012 to exiting our business, selling our business for a multiple to a buyer who actually wanted to grow it, required a lot of good luck, right? It required persistence, but it required things coming together. And then it also required the willingness to pivot. We had a lot of really shitty things happen to us that in hindsight were critical components to getting us to the finish line. But at the moment in time, they seem like bad luck, not good luck.
But looking back, you see them as key pivot points, right?
Yeah, like the FDA shut us down last summer for 8 days.
Wow.
So we're in the middle of our high season. Yes, we got shut down for 8 days.
In the summer. And this is cold brew coffee. In the summer. Yeah, so let's harp on that. We do 60% of our sales in 3 months, right? So that's really bad that they shut us down for 8 days, but it gets worse. Not only did they shut us down, they then went and called our customers. So we didn't even have an opportunity to notify our customers. They went and called them and said, hey, by the way, these products are all been put on hold. And those were your wholesalers, I'm assuming?
Those were, yes. Obviously not. They didn't put it in the newspaper, but they went and basically took every SKU that we had. A lot of our business is private label, and took those SKUs and said, wow, okay, here's so-and-so, here's so-and-so, and here's so-and-so. We just put your product on hold at Rich Good Gourmet because they don't have the appropriate paperwork on file. And I was freaking out. I'm like, wait, not only did you not give me a chance to get you the paperwork, I have the paperwork. It's sitting right here. I didn't recognize I hadn't filed it properly. But you have now made my customers no longer believe in me. Right? So I didn't even get the chance to correct my own situation. So then, and that was June 8th. So you can imagine June 16th, 17th, we're wondering, are we going to have any customers left? Like, we were preparing mentally and emotionally to go all the way back down to the Pepper Place days. And then you're wondering, is it even worth going forward? So, but in hindsight, that moment of weakness actually led our customer, Royal Cup, who is now our acquirer, to learn more about our process and the unique components of our business that caused the FDA to be inquisitive. But does that make sense? That we have a proprietary process that allows us to create shelf-stable cold brew coffee, which is unique. There's only 2 others in the market that do it, and only one of those is preservative-free like we are. Wow. And they have a patented process and proprietary. And so at the end of the day, that FDA shutdown basically exposed us and ultimately led us to the road where people started to realize what we were doing was one of a kind, and not just.
So it kind of put you on the map in some way.
It did, but at the time it didn't feel like that was the situation.
Oh, you were taken off the map for 8 days completely and erased. Yeah.
for 8 days. Yes.
So tell us about that, because that's super exciting news. You just mentioned the big A word that we all love to hear, and some love to hear, is acquisition, right? That's awesome.
Acquisition,
when did that happen? How did that go? Was that the overall goal of the business from the start, or was that kind of like a mind-blowing opportunity that you would have never envisioned 4 years ago?
So this would be my other advice to emerging entrepreneurs, is when we started out, I was going to sell my business, right? Remember, I'm making $1 million in 11 weeks at Pepper Place. So I'm going to have a $100 million cold brew company in like 1 year if you multiply that. We wanted to sell the business. I wanted to sell our business from day one. There were many times when all I did was focus on that and not the things that make a business sellable. What makes a business sellable is, in our situation, high quality products, great customer service, healthy margins, and a true scalability, which comes down to, do you have supply chain, we're in consumer packaged goods. So are your raw materials manageable? If you get Walmart as a customer tomorrow, can you actually service that, right? Because if you have this super cute niche product, but the only way to make it is in 5-gallon buckets with Pantyhose, then you can't go much further, right? You can't go past Pepper Place,
Right.
With that. So the reason I say is I always wanted to sell. I never really had the tools to sell until June of last year when the shutdown came. And we had to strip down and reevaluate how we did business and figure out where we could drive the most value and really start to focus on building a sustainable business. And then as a result of building a sustainable business and starting to trim the fat, and also the cold brew set got more competitive, and you would perceive that to be a disadvantage, but it actually continued to be an advantage because we recognize we're never going to be Stumptown. Stumptown is a great cold brew brand. It's a great roast and ground brand, a great brick and mortar, but it has all those things, and it has hundreds of millions of dollars, and we're still self-financing. Mm-hmm. So we need to start focusing on what we can do really well, which is delivering shelf-stable goods to people. And by focusing on that and starting to trim, like you guys know Icebox. Icebox, the brand, is 3% of our overall business. It's our customer facing, but it's not what drives value to our business. Mm-hmm. It's actually like a giant loss leader. So with that being said, by pivoting and starting to build rather a business, one that was sustainable in our situation, it wound up generating. So we went to a more conservative approach, and as a result, we wound up on 3,000% year-over-year growth in 6 months. So it was interesting how you would think we were pivoting to a lifestyle business, and instead we just figured out where our niche really was, and it was not in building a brand; it was in building a sustainable liquid manufacturing business.
That's awesome.
Isn't that interesting how that came out of the Pantyhose bucket idea 4 years ago? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, surely you weren't thinking of, or maybe you were, maybe you were, but I would not have been thinking about that when I thought I'm going to start a cold brew coffee company.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Just what you said at the end there about finding your niche. I think people know what they want to do, but again, like you just said, you have to really get in there and get after it to really find where that niche is that you are going to make it in, right? Mm-hmm. You might think it's one thing, and maybe it is for a while to get you started, but ultimately, unless you're just out there getting after it, and I think that's why we hear over and over, you just got to get in the game, because if you're not in the game, you're not going to find out what that is. Yeah,
and you got to assume your blueprint on paper is V1, and that you're going to have like version 20, 30, 40. You got pivot points, and you can choose to pivot, or you can stay the course. And for some people, staying the course works, but you're missing. You just got to be able to check that against something. And so my other key advice, is find people to bounce your ideas off of. For me, it started as my husband. Then we built a small advisory board of people who they weren't getting paid. They just saw that we were trying and were willing to lend their time and talent. Some function in the food and beverage space, and some functioned in totally different realms. But at the end of the day, you could check your idea against someone, and they also keep you on track. I mean, the problem with the world in which we live today is there's so much opportunity in front of us that it's easy to get distracted. because you can, especially I think people who identify themselves as entrepreneurs are constantly looking for the next best idea, and maybe they just need to sit back and focus on the one that's in front of them, but be open to, that sounds contradictory what I'm saying, but at the end of the day, you know, you can get like 20 great ideas. One of them's going to work, 19 of them are going to fail, but you need to kind of flush them out, but also be willing to recognize that idea number 19 might come out of idea number 6. You just don't know yet.
You're so right. And the doors just continue to open as you walk down the path, or close in many cases.
Yeah, and if they close, move on.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
I love that, BB.
Well, BB, I guess to wrap up, I know y'all have products in a lot of different places. Where can our audience find you? Where's the best place for them to go to find you? Are there social media links? Give us a little information on all that.
Yeah, you can order online through our website, or if you're in the, which is iceboxcoffee.com. If you're in the Birmingham area, you can go to the Pigs, the Westerns, Whole Foods, go to Pepper Place on Saturday still, and our partner Homewood Gourmet is there. And then otherwise, drink Royal Cup coffee, right? Because now when you drink Royal Cup, you drink Icebox. So you need to go out and drink it. Yes, and plentiful.
Gosh, we love that support. Congratulations on the recent acquisition.
Congratulations.
The dreams have come true, and
Thank
you
y'all.
really are a shining example of what it takes when the stars align. But in order to get those stars to align, you got to push them in the right place, right? And you did that. So congrats, BB. That's awesome.
Yeah, and move on if one hits you in the head, right? Like if one falls on top of you, like that shooting star fizzles out. Don't worry about it, because there's always something else.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, BB, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank y'all. Take care.
Now check it out one time, I got a show to do. And if you love hip-hop, I'm about to go for you.
Does everyone want to run out to their local grocery store and grab cold brew coffee now?
Because if you were in the states of Texas, Florida, Arkansas, Tennessee, Georgia, I'm spitballing this.
You forgot Alabama.
Alabama, and I think even North Carolina and South Carolina, they all have Icebox. But that's so cool. But what's even cooler is that Icebox is just, what did she say? She was like, that's like 3% of our revenue at this point.
That's crazy to me.
I had always envisioned them as Icebox is the thing.
Yeah.
But she has basically said, I found the process and I'm able to distribute that process to many, 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 many different companies throughout the US.
Yeah.
I mean, their reach is much further than here in the Southeast if you're looking at these sub-brands that they operate under.
Well, I just think that's so cool. And I said it in an interview and I'll say it again. Just finding your niche, man. I mean, she thought it was going to be one thing and then getting out there and figuring out, well, I can actually go out here and do this and make a lot more money and be a lot more profitable and be a lot more successful overall.
And not have to use pantyhose and buckets.
That's a big plus.
I love that, though. But let's talk about that really quickly. Bootstrapping. I mean, BB's like, look, and yes, she did take out a loan when they grew 3,000%. Like, what are you going to do? You're either going to settle and quit and take the cash out and die, or take on capital. And they were at that point. She started with beans that her father had roasted. She drove up from New Orleans.
So awesome.
She went to Home Depot or wherever that was, got a gallon bucket, went to Walmart and got some pantyhose and did her cycle. That was it. She figured it out. Just through those cheap 3 or 4 things, she began Icebox Coffee. And here we are 4.5 years later. She's been acquired by one of the South's largest coffee distributors and roasters out of Royal Cup. That's a really huge deal.
Oh, it's a crazy huge deal. And I just want to I know this is kind of off topic a little bit, but I just want to ask real quick, is anybody else as intrigued as I am on what you do with the 5-gallon bucket and the pantyhose? We've talked about this for so much of this episode. I know. I have no clue what you do.
I have to assume she is stretching that thing out like it's over a really, really large leg, like an elephant leg around the bucket, and siphoning the coffee grounds.
Baby, we're going to call you back and ask you about that.
But that's where their intellectual I mean, hey, that's trademark. You can't dig into that's a patent system.
True.
That is a patent system. The pantyhose.
I've just this whole day I've just been like, what do they do with that pantyhose?
I love that.
But anyway, I did want to touch on one more thing. You talked about the bootstrapping, just the people around you. And we didn't really focus on this as much in the interview with BB, but she talked about, there are times where sometimes you're just not feeling it. You really are feeling like you want to quit. You're down about something. And I think it's great to focus on having a great support cast around you. For her, especially early on, it was her husband. And she even told us in the interview, there was times there, one time in particular where she wanted to quit and her husband had to say, look, this is where we're at. These things are still true. You still love doing this. So there's no quitting here. You're keeping on and you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's that moment you as an entrepreneur, and I know that you hear this and I know that you know this, but I've got to tell you again, as an entrepreneur, you cannot just live in one single moment, because if you do, you will be defeated.
Oh, yeah.
I promise you that. You've got to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And for BB, that was to sell. And it happened. And did it happen overnight? Of course not. She didn't get to 11 or a million in sales over 11 weeks. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But she set a lofty goal and she used that as motivation. And granted, she got there.
Oh, yeah. And again, having an advisory board to bounce ideas off of. Again,
you know what? You listening, I would like for you to be our advisory board. I would like for you as a listener to be on the Millennovator advisory board. We want you sending us feedback about the show. Shoot us an email, drop us a line at millennovator@gmail.com. We want to hear your feedback. Also, we want you on Facebook. I posted on Facebook today some upcoming episodes that we're going to have. There are some really, really strong entrepreneurs on that list.
Oh, yeah.
But I can't grow that list on who I want on the show. I want to grow that list on who you want on the show.
Yeah, and we're super excited. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be, but later this year, I would assume we are going to have a Facebook community that we're going to create. And so we can all collaborate on different ideas just like this. We're super excited about it because we feel like all of you listeners out there have something to contribute, not only to us, but to each other. And we think that'll be a great place for us to do that.
So do you want to be on our advisory board or not? Because if you do, I want you to send us an email right now. If you're driving, don't send us an email right now. But if you're sitting at home listening to the podcast, if you're mowing the grass listening to the podcast, shoot us an email at millennovator@gmail.com. That email address will always be active. It will be forwarded to anything we have in the future so that I can hear this many, 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 many months down the road. I can get your feedback from the show because we want to hear it.
Amen.
So guys, don't forget, if you love today's episode, shoot us an email and like us on Facebook. Leave us a comment on Facebook. We want to hear. And as always, don't forget to leave us a review. We thrive by listening to your reviews.
Reviews are the best.
In fact, every time Jonathan hears your reviews, he has to shave his chest with Nair.
No. I am not doing Nair.
So until the next time, guys, keep Jonathan's chest shaved with Nair. Leave us a review.
It's more like burned with Nair.
And we'll see you on the next podcast episode.
See you guys.
Now check it out one time, I got a show to do. And if you love hip-hop, I'm about to phone with you.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to call your mother and tell that woman that you love her. And if you love the show almost as much, subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a sweet review. We're definitely not ashamed to blush. Now, go forward and implement what you learned from today's episode into your business. We cannot wait to personally hear your story of success and replicate it 1,000 times over.
Give me the mic now.